Imagine being 19 years old and having dinner with the very men who would kill you if they discovered who you really were. That was Sonia Butt's life. To the Nazis, she looked charming, friendly, harmless. But every smile was a lie, every conversation was a mission, and every day could have been her last. Because Sonia wasn't just talking to the Gestapo, she was spying on them. While German officers shared secrets, she quietly passed information to the resistance. While the Nazis believed they were in control, a teenage girl was helping undermine everything they had built. One mistake, one suspicious glance, one wrong word, and she would disappear forever. Yet she kept going back, again, and again, and again. How did a 19-year-old girl fool some of the most dangerous men in Europe? How did she help prepare the way for D-Day? And why did the woman who risked everything for freedom later find herself fighting for her own reputation? This is the incredible true story of Sonia Butt, the teenage spy who fooled the Gestapo, the girl who was born for this, long before the Nazis knew her name, before the resistance trusted her, and before she risked her life behind enemy lines. Sonia Butt was just a young girl growing up in Europe, but history had different plans for her. Sonia was born in Belgium in 1924. Her father was British. Her mother was Belgian. From an early age, she lived between two worlds, two cultures, two identities, and without realizing it, those experiences would one day make her the perfect spy. As a child, Sonia was intelligent, confident, and unusually independent. She learned languages easily. She could adapt quickly to new situations, and she possessed a natural charm that made people feel comfortable around her. Years later, those same qualities would help her survive some of the most dangerous missions of World War II. Then came 1940. Everything changed. Nazi Germany invaded Belgium. Within weeks, the country fell under German occupation. Suddenly, German soldiers filled the streets. Military checkpoints appeared everywhere. Fear became part of daily life. For ordinary civilians, life grew increasingly difficult. For young Sonia, it became impossible to ignore what was happening around her. She watched her country lose its freedom. She saw families living in fear, and she witnessed the growing power of the Nazi regime. Many people chose to stay quiet. Some believed resistance was hopeless. Others were simply too frightened to act. But Sonia was different. The occupation only strengthened her determination. As the war intensified, resistance networks began forming across occupied Europe. Their mission was dangerous: gather intelligence, sabotage German operations, help Allied forces, and prepare for the day Europe would finally be liberated. The work required courage, secrecy, and absolute trust. One mistake could lead to arrest, torture, or execution. Yet despite the risks, Sonia wanted to help. She was still very young, but she understood something important. Freedom would not return on its own. People had to fight for it. As Allied intelligence agencies searched for recruits, they weren't only looking for soldiers. They needed people who could blend in, people who could move unnoticed, people who could gain trust. Sonia fit that description perfectly. She was young, well-spoken, intelligent, and capable of remaining calm under pressure. The war would pull her into a hidden world few people ever saw. A world of coded messages, secret meetings, false identities, and deadly risks. She was about to leave behind the life of an ordinary young woman and step into the life of a spy, a role that would place her face to face with some of the most dangerous men in Nazi-occupied Europe. And somehow, she would convince them to trust her. Most spies avoided the Gestapo at all costs. Sonia did the exact opposite. She moved closer. Much closer. Soon German officers would welcome her into their world. Without realizing they were sharing secrets with the enemy. Firewoman detective. Getting close to the enemy. Most resistance fighters avoided German officers whenever possible. The Gestapo was feared throughout occupied Europe. Their reputation was terrifying. They arrested suspects without warning, interrogated prisoners without mercy, and crushed resistance networks wherever they found them. Most people crossed the street to avoid them. Sonia Butt did something very different. She moved closer, much closer, because sometimes the safest place for a spy is exactly where nobody expects to find one. As the war continued, Sonia became involved in intelligence work supporting the Allied cause. Her mission wasn't to carry weapons or blow up bridges. Her greatest weapon was something far more powerful: trust. Sonia understood how people worked. She knew how to listen, how to ask questions without appearing suspicious, and how to make others feel comfortable. These skills soon made her extremely valuable. German officers often saw her as a harmless young woman, someone they could relax around, someone who posed no threat. That assumption became their biggest mistake. At social gatherings, restaurants, cafes, and military events, Sonia listened carefully. Conversations flowed freely. German officers discussed troop movements, military plans, security arrangements, and information they never imagined would reach Allied intelligence. Sonia rarely needed to ask direct questions. People often revealed secrets on their own, especially when they believed nobody was paying attention. Every detail mattered: a train schedule, a military convoy, a unit transfer, a defensive position. Information that seemed insignificant on its own could become incredibly valuable when combined with other intelligence. But gathering information was only half the challenge. Passing it on was even more dangerous. Occupied Europe was filled with informants, German checkpoints, random searches, and constant surveillance. One hidden message discovered by the wrong person could end everything. Yet Sonia continued her work, day after day, month after month, always balancing on the edge of disaster. The closer she got to German officers, the greater the risk became, because trust works both ways. The Nazis trusted Sonia, but that meant they expected loyalty in return. The deeper she entered their world, the harder it became to hide who she really was. One careless comment, one contradiction, one suspicious observer, and her cover could collapse. Still, she refused to back away, because by 1944, the Allies were preparing for something enormous. Something that would change the course of the war. The invasion of Nazi-occupied France, D-Day, and Sonia's intelligence work was becoming more important than ever. What she didn't know was that the most dangerous part of her mission was still ahead, because soon, she would find herself operating in a world where a single mistake could mean torture or death. 9 days before D-Day, a 19-year-old spy was already behind enemy lines. German soldiers surrounded her. The Gestapo was everywhere, and one wrong move could expose everything. Yet Sonia kept playing the most dangerous game of her life. June 1944. Europe stood on the edge of a turning point. Across the English Channel, thousands of Allied soldiers were preparing for the largest amphibious invasion in history. The operation would become known as D-Day. But before a single soldier landed on the beaches of Normandy, a different battle was already being fought. A battle of information. And Sonia Butt was right in the middle of it. At just 19 years old, she was operating in occupied France, surrounded by German troops, military patrols, and Nazi intelligence officers. Everywhere she looked, there were uniforms, checkpoints, weapons, and danger. Most civilians lived in fear. Most resistance members stayed hidden. But Sonia had to remain visible. That was part of her mission. She couldn't disappear into the shadows. She had to move among the very people she was secretly working against. Each day required absolute control. Every word, every expression, every reaction. A single mistake could expose her. And if the Gestapo discovered the truth, there would be no escape. No second chance. No merci. Yet Sonia remained calm. She attended social events, met German officers, and listened carefully. Information flowed constantly. Some officers spoke too freely. Others believed victory was inevitable. Many never imagined that a young woman sitting nearby was quietly collecting details that could help the Allies. The irony was extraordinary. The Nazis were desperately hunting spies, while a spy sat right beside them, listening, watching, remembering. Meanwhile, resistance networks across France were becoming increasingly active. They knew a major Allied operation was coming. They didn't know exactly when, but they knew the moment was close. Rail lines were being watched, communication routes monitored. Military activity increased everywhere. The atmosphere was tense. Everyone sensed that something big was approaching. Then came the final days before D-Day. The stakes became even higher. German forces tightened security. Patrols increased. Suspicion grew. The Gestapo intensified efforts to uncover resistance agents. Arrests became more common. Interrogations became harsher. Every day brought new risks. For Sonia, the pressure was enormous. One wrong step now could destroy months of intelligence work. Worse, it could endanger countless lives. But despite the danger, she continued, because she understood what was at stake: the liberation of Europe, the defeat of Nazi Germany, and the hope that millions had waited years to see. Then finally, on June 6, 1944, the invasion began. Allied forces stormed the beaches of Normandy. The long-awaited liberation had started. For many people, D-Day was the beginning of the end of Nazi occupation. For Sonia, it was the moment she realized that every risk she had taken, every lie she had told, and every secret she had carried, had been worth it. But victory would bring unexpected challenges, because surviving the war would prove easier than what came next. The Nazis were retreating. France was being liberated. And Sonia should have been celebrated as a hero. Instead, she found herself facing accusations, suspicion, and betrayal. The war was ending. But her toughest battle was about to begin. By the summer of 1944, the war was changing. Allied forces were advancing across France. German troops were retreating, and cities that had lived under Nazi occupation for years were finally being liberated. For most resistance fighters, this was the moment they had dreamed about. The moment victory finally seemed possible. For Sonia Butt, it should have been the happiest time of her life. She had risked everything, lived among the enemy, gathered intelligence, and helped the Allied cause during one of the most critical periods of the war. She should have been welcomed as a hero. Instead, she became a target, because liberation brought a new problem: suspicion. Across France and Belgium, people wanted justice. After years of occupation, anger exploded. Anyone suspected of helping the Germans faced public humiliation. Accusations spread quickly. Sometimes the accusations were true. Sometimes they were not. In the chaos following liberation, facts often mattered less than appearances. And Sonia had a dangerous appearance problem. For years, people had seen her socializing with German officers, talking with them, laughing with them, attending events where Nazis were present. Most people never knew why. They never knew she was gathering intelligence. They never knew she was working for the Allied cause. All they saw was a young woman who seemed unusually comfortable around the enemy. Rumors began to spread. Whispers turned into accusations. Some people questioned her loyalty. Others wondered whether she had collaborated with the Germans. For Sonia, the situation was heartbreaking. The very actions that had made her an effective spy now made her look guilty. Her greatest success had become her greatest problem. And unlike during the war, there was no secret mission she could reveal. Many intelligence operations remained classified. Many details could not be discussed publicly. She had spent years protecting secrets. Now those same secrets prevented her from defending herself. It was a cruel irony. The woman who had risked her life fighting the Nazis was being judged by people who never knew the truth. Fortunately, not everyone doubted her. Those who understood intelligence work knew how dangerous her missions had been. They knew the risks she had taken. They knew how close she had come to disaster. Slowly, the truth began to emerge. Investigations confirmed her service. Witnesses supported her story, and those who had worked with Allied intelligence recognized her contributions. Bit by bit, her reputation was restored, but the experience left scars. Because Sonia learned something many wartime heroes discovered. Winning a war does not always end the struggle. Sometimes, The hardest battles come afterward. Yet despite everything, she never regretted her choices. She never regretted the risks. Because she knew what was at stake. Freedom, liberation, and the defeat of one of history's most brutal regimes. The world was finally learning the truth about Sonia Butt. But her remarkable journey was not over. Because in the years ahead, the teenage spy would build a new life. And eventually, history would remember her not as a suspect, but as one of the brave young women who helped defeat Nazi Germany. She survived the Gestapo. She survived the war. And she survived the accusations. But what happened to Sonia after the fighting ended? Did she finally find peace? Or did the shadows of her secret life follow her forever? The war was over. The Nazi occupation had ended. Europe was finally beginning to heal. For millions of people, it was a chance to start again. And for Sonia Butt, it was a chance to leave behind the dangerous world she had lived in for years. No more secret missions. No more coded messages. No more living under constant threat of discovery. For the first time in a long time, she could simply be herself. Yet moving on was not as easy as it sounded. How do you return to an ordinary life after spending your youth deceiving some of the most dangerous men in Europe? How do you explain experiences that few people can truly understand? How do you forget a life where every conversation could have been your last? Like many wartime agents, Sonia carried memories that never completely disappeared. The faces of those who didn't survive. The fear she felt during dangerous missions. The pressure of knowing that one mistake could cost lives. Those memories remained with her. But so did something else. Pride. Because despite her age, despite the risks, and despite the doubts she later faced, she had done something extraordinary. She had stood against tyranny. She had chosen courage over safety. And she had helped the Allied cause during one of the darkest periods in modern history. As the years passed, the world slowly learned more about the hidden heroes of World War II. Stories that had once been classified began to emerge. The contributions of resistance fighters, intelligence agents, and ordinary people who had performed extraordinary acts. Among them was Sonia Butt, the young woman who had walked among German officers, while secretly working against them. The teenager who had risked everything for freedom. The spy who understood that sometimes, the most powerful weapon isn't a gun. It's trust. History often remembers generals, politicians, and battlefield commanders. But wars are not won by famous people alone. They are also won by the quiet heroes. The people whose names rarely appear in textbooks. The people who work in the shadows. The people who risk everything without expecting recognition. Sonia was one of those people. She never commanded an army. She never led a nation. Yet her courage helped shape the outcome of a war that changed the world. Today, her story remains a reminder that bravery has no age. You don't have to be powerful to make a difference. You don't have to be famous to change history. Sometimes, a determined 19-year-old girl can accomplish more than anyone ever imagined. And that is exactly what Sonia Butt did. She fooled the Gestapo, helped the fight for freedom, and survived one of the most dangerous chapters in human history. Not because she was fearless, but because she believed some things were worth risking everything for. Freedom, justice, and the future. She was only 19. The Nazis trusted her. The Gestapo never suspected her. And that made her one of the most dangerous people in occupied Europe. She lived a double life, risked everything, and helped the fight for freedom from behind enemy lines. History nearly forgot her. But her courage deserves to be remembered. Her name was Sonia Butt, and her silent strength helped change the course of World War II.